I just want everyone to know all they can know about me so I can finally be myself. That got deep pretty quickly. What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the second time I'm attempting to, sit down and record this podcast, because on Friday I tried to record the podcast, but for some reason I end up scratching the whatever I had done, because it felt like I was doing something completely different from what I wanted the podcast to be. The podcast stemmed from my desire to try to understand some things about myself, about my life, about other people, through understanding other people's lives, right? Through having conversations, through exploring ideas and topics that I don't necessarily have enough knowledge about. And because I'm not able to have, guests on right now, I thought that I could sort of have a format where I do a solo podcast, sort of explore the same things that I would explore with, while having a conversation with another person, but through films. The idea being that, I sit down every week, look at the film that I found interesting, dissect, some of the things about storytelling, but more so focusing on the things that the characters are going through and how they're dealing with them, and what I can take out of, the films and whatnot. Excuse me. The Bear is by far one of my favorite shows. And episode 6 is probably the best episode on any show that I've ever seen. Okay? I love that episode. But I basically sit down, look at the story, try to dissect it. At the end of the filming session, I look back at the content, and to me, it felt like an editing tutorial, like a tutorial about editing or video storytelling. And I don't know, that did not sit well with me, because it's not what I intended to do. It's not what I intend the podcast to be, right? It would not lead to the direction I want the podcast to eventually go in. As humble as it is that I'm starting the podcast, I have a vision for it to become something. And by starting from, this story analyzing, it would not lead to where I think I want the podcast to go, right? So it's scratch it. We're going to try something different. I journal, okay? Most of the times I'm not going in and making detailed notes. It's basically I have a Notion page in which I dump, thoughts, things I find interesting, conversations that I had with someone that I found interesting, right? And I thought that it would be interesting for me to sit down every week, look at some of the things that I noted down throughout the week, and try to talk about them. I mean, most of the thoughts that I write down are things that I think can relate to other people. Obviously, I note them down because I found them interesting, or I thought it's something that I wanted to document and keep for myself. And by me sitting down every week and going back to the stuff that I wrote down, to the stuff that I noted down, and trying to have a conversation about it. I mean, it's going to be a conversation with me and myself. One, it will help me understand better those things and the things that I find interesting and why I find them interesting and explore them, it feels like it would take them out of the book and make them part of my life, but by trying to analyze them at least. That's like a second level of internalizing them and making them part of my life. And we're nothing except our ideas. It's the ideas, it's how you see the world that guides you, that guides how you act in the world and what you do. Yes, that's what we're going to do. Starting with this week, I wrote down 3 things. Okay, the first is something that I just touched on, which is solo podcasting is really hard. It's really difficult because I don't know, there's something weird about like sitting down and having a conversation with a camera and trying to act like it's normal, right? Come across authentic and whatnot. And I've gotten so much better, but it's still I gotta do this, right? But the reason why I do it is I think it's very, very important to be able to express your ideas. But what doing this helps you, and the big reason why I'm starting the podcast, is it allows you to develop. It allows you the ability to develop. It allows you to develop the ability to have something to say. Right? It's not like only how you say it. It's like having something to say. Being knowledgeable about different things and having an opinion about life, about the world in general and whatever. There's a lot of things that I don't understand. I'm so aware of how dumb I can be about some things. And it's only by me trying to explore at least the things that I encounter, right? The conversation that I have with other people. It's me by trying to dissect the interestingness from those things, from those sources, from all sources of information, that I'm able to form opinions, that I'm able to have ideas that I can use to navigate my way through life. It's only by doing this, it's only by sitting down, it's only by starting with nothing to say, having nothing to say, and forming sentences that don't connect, or struggling to connect thoughts and make sense in the beginning. It's only by trying to do that you get to a point where you can communicate at the highest level. And looking at like how I was at the beginning of 2023, and looking at the progress that I've made now, like from a storytelling perspective, from an understanding of filmmaking and scripting and writing and having an idea and seeing it through and producing it, from having an idea to making a video to getting people to watch it. Dude, like that is the only evidence that I need to only trust in the process, right? To understand, it's just a reality. When you start something new, you're gonna suck. It's gonna suck. And it's supposed to be. Like when you go back and look at like the top podcasts, when I was, researching, trying to begin to figure out how do I start the podcast and whatever, I went back and looked at like the biggest podcasters in the world. Joe Rogan, Chris William, and Stephen Bartlett. Like if you go back and look at their first episode, like it's, to be honest, I probably have better equipment than Joe Rogan did. He was literally doing it like virtually on Twitter or something. He's now the biggest podcaster in the world. Obviously, he's like talented because not everybody gets to that point. But that's not the point. The point is, even if you don't have talent, if you show up consistently, you're gonna get better. And I hope by, me coming up with this new format of, just going through my thoughts, trying just like being me in front of the camera, and not like trying to put on a show, not trying to, just like documenting my ideas, analyzing them, and hopefully someone somewhere is going to find them interesting and relate to them. The second thing that I wrote down was just a little grace. And I wrote this down after having a conversation with Granny. We were talking about like someone in the family who, let's say, is not at the point where he should be. Okay? And I hold grudges against this person. Okay? Or I used to hold, because I feel a little bit different after this conversation. And she was basically telling me like this person is like, it's not his fault. It's not his fault that he is who he is. It's not his fault that he is not at the point where he should be, or doing what he should be doing, or whatever, right? She told me about, the circumstances in which this person was born in, and all kinds of shit like he had to go through, and whatnot. Basically trying to communicate that if anybody had gone through what the person went through, if I had gone through what the person went through, I probably could have turned out like he did. So just like have some empathy. That was her message. Yeah, that stuck with me, because if you think about it, it's the circumstances that you were brought up in. It's your life experiences, it's the people you meet, it's the films you watch, it's the ideas you get introduced to and you choose to keep to yourself or keep in your mind, that end up guiding who you are as a person. And she reminded me of that, because what that means is like, yes, you can choose the ideas you choose to follow and live by. You can choose to pick better films. You can choose to listen to better podcasts or whatever, a podcast that gives you ideas that are good for you. You can choose to go ahead and work out. You can choose to eat better or whatever. But some things you don't choose. Sometimes some you don't choose where you were born. You don't choose like the family you were born in. You don't choose when you are born or when you're brought up, what is happening around you, and whatever. And those things play a big part in who you end up becoming. And so it's less about that person. It's have a little grace towards yourself. There are a lot of shit that you probably, suffer from, habits that you're not able to shake off or whatever. It's not to say that you can't, that you don't need to put in the effort to get better and improve and whatever, or people shouldn't people should be, assholes, and that's good, and is that by understanding that is the reality, that the reality is that people are probably going through shit that they're going through, or they're behaving how they're behaving, not because that's like what they chose to be. At least I don't know, informs how you approach people. I think it informs how I approach people now, right? I think by starting from that place, at least you can get to a point where getting better is possible, right? Because now you understand that there's something driving you or driving me or driving the things that I do. There's something that I don't know that might have happened along the way that makes me, who I am in this way. That I don't have to beat myself up that much. I can put in the work to get better. But if it doesn't work, it's okay, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. But just have a little grace for yourself, for other people. Have some empathy. You have no idea what is going on, what went on. Yeah. Just have some grace. And the last thing that I wrote down was I just want everyone, this is a little bit deep. I just want everyone to know all they can know about me so I can finally be myself. I don't even know what I meant by this, but I think with the theme of starting the podcast, trying to be vulnerable, trying to not just like on the podcast, but also like with my friends and with my family and with people that I interact with. There's a part of me that wants to put myself out there so that I can authentically be myself and not have to keep anything, not have to pretend like I'm someone else because people know this thing about me that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to be vulnerable about 5 years ago. Even like I just created a video about my story of me growing up in a refugee camp, and that's not something that I was having conversations about 2 years ago, even a year ago. It's something that I grew up being ashamed of. I didn't want people to know. I didn't want people to know that I grew up in a refugee camp because I felt like they would judge me, or they would not find me cool, or they would. It puts you in a box. So you grew up in a refugee camp, so you must be, right? You must be a person who behaves this certain way. Like there's stereotypes of like people who grow up in a refugee camp that they behave this way and whatever. And I didn't want to be associated with that, right? So I didn't want to. So what I'm trying to say by saying this, I want everybody to know about. It's not just me growing up in a refugee camp. That's like an example, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that I held to myself because I didn't want another person to know, because they would judge me, and that ends up like getting me to behave in a way that is not necessarily in line with who I am, right? So I sort of like my journey of being vulnerable, and there are things that I'm going to keep to myself, right? Like, but being vulnerable, for me at least, is a way of, I think there's nothing beautiful. There's nothing as beautiful as being authentically yourself, regardless of where you are, like regardless of who you are with, regardless of like circumstances that you're in, right? And being authentic to yourself doesn't mean like be stupid and like be who you would be if you were like in a room by yourself. But it means that at least the things you say and the things you do are in line with who you believe yourself to be or who you want to be or whatever, right? So yeah, it's a journey. It's a long journey. It's a lot of things that I have to work through, even like before being vulnerable about something, making sure that, you know, I process it, I understand it, I understand that, you know, it's not, I'm not using that like as sort of like mechanism to get away from something. But yeah, I do want to be free of some bullshit that I kept telling myself for a long time as a child, saying, you know, that if they know, then they will, something like that, you know. Yeah, that got deep pretty quickly. Yeah, so that's all I have really for this week. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.